few anecdotes about the Rebbe, the Rebbitson, the significance of these few days. Yud-Gimel, Kislev, Yud-Daled Kislev, and Tesvav Kislev. Can you hear me in the back? Probably not. Well, something very special happened 31 years ago today, at this time of the night, on Yud-Gimel, Yud-Daled Kislev. It was in Tovshin Memhei. It was before the trial of the books that were stolen from the Rebbe's library. I'm sure most of you, or all of you, are familiar with what happened. It was a very tragic episode, and it was very, very uncomfortable to deal with, but we had to. And the Seder in litigation is that before you come to the courthouse, before the judge, and present your side and the opposite side presents theirs, there's a period called discovery, when each side has time to make their case, to search for documents and ask for documents, and do depositions. Depositions is something that is very, very depressing and uncomfortable. A deposition is when the opposing side calls on people from the opposite side and sits them down and asks questions. A deposition can last an hour, can last a day, can last a week. And if you call to a deposition, you got to go. It's the law. No matter who you are, there's no yichus, you have to go to the deposition. And usually the opposing lawyer tries to make you suffer, tries to confuse you. So in the questions that he asks about the case, he'll 5 minutes into the deposition, he'll ask you a question. 2 hours later or the next morning, he can ask the same question in different words. If your answer doesn't fit the first answer, it means you're lying. It doesn't look very good before the judge when he sees the papers, how the people responded. So, in any case, in this case of the books, it was Yud Gimel. There was a struggle. We had a struggle because they wanted to depose the Rebbe. Before that, they wanted to depose the Rebbitson, and we didn't want them to do that to her. She was a frail woman, very lucid, and very nice looking. But it's not an initial COVID. So we tried to avoid it. And then there came a point we didn't see any Uisweg, any way how we could get around it. So I told the Rebbe that they want to depose the Rebbitson, and we really can't, we find no way, after struggling for days, how to prevent it. So the Rebbe says, why prevent it? She can be deposed. Nothing to worry about. You'll see she'll come through with flying colors. So Skwan Lechtaf and Harson felt a little more comfortable as the Rebbe is actually suggesting that we do it. So good. So he was also prognosticating that it would be Batzlacha. So the day came, and one condition we made was that the deposition should take place right here in that dining room, right over there, right behind you. Those were the facing this way. And the day came, and there were 3 lawyers representing our case sitting around the table, and the opposition, Barry Grari's attorneys, 3 of them, sat on the other side of the table. And they were asking questions. They started asking questions. There was a translator there, a certified translator, but Rebbitson spoke a perfect English, but she did say some things in Yiddish. And but in any case, that translator was also there in the room. She asked me to sit next to her, which I did. And they started asking questions. First, they're simple, and they thought out their questions, the opposing lawyers, very, very brilliantly. They were good lawyers. 2 of them are judges now in the federal court. And it went on and on, close to 2 hours. In the course of the 2 hours, we tried to confuse her and mix her up, but she was much better than a person half her age. I mean, she was just perfect. She didn't say an extra word. It's one of the rules. Whatever you're not asked, don't offer any information that's not requested. Nothing, no matter how good you might think it'd be for your case. Keep quiet. People find it very hard to restrain themselves. They get cooked up. In the answer, they start talking about things. They say something, and then the lawyer says, "Oh," they they take that as make it into an issue. So she was just perfect, and I know that there was a videotape of that deposition, and it wasn't supposed to get out, but it did get out somehow. It was actually part of the public record. There wasn't much we could do to prevent it. Not that there's anything that we should be reticent about, but we just would have preferred not to have it out, but it's out. So I'm sure many of you may have seen it, and I can't go over the whole question, the whole litany of questions and answers. But they saw that I could see in the lawyers' faces that they realized they're not getting any place and they're wasting the time. Not only that, but her testimony could be harmful to their case. And it was. And towards the end of the case, towards the end of the interrogation, I would call it, not an interrogation. That's a serious word. It came down to the bottom line. The whole case turned on who did the library belong to? Who did the books belong to in 770, 760, next door 766? If they belonged to the Rebbe, her father, the Friedman Rebbe, then it means that Barry had right to the books. He was an heir. H-E-I-R, an heir. And if it belonged to the community, like the Rebbe said, it belongs to Agudas Chassidei Chabad, the whole. So then he had no right to touch it, and no right to go in there without permission, let alone have a key that he had from his mother. So they said to her, they asked her, tell us, Mrs. Schneerson, who do the books belong to your father or to the community? And she said, my father owned nothing. He belonged to Chassidim, and everything that he had belonged to Chassidim. And they shut off the video. That was it. I saw the lawyer threw the pencils down in frustration on the table, and then she turns to me. His tallis and film that he owned. It was poetic. It was brilliant. That's after almost 2 hours of a lot of tension. She seemed very calm, very, very cool, calm, and collected. There were other incidents in the deposition that were interesting, but in Kanamokim. So as soon as everybody left the house, I ran to 770. I drove to 770. I went into the Rebbe and I told him exactly what transpired, and that it was par excellence. So the Rebbe said, I told you so. But something remarkable happened at the trial. The trial began on Yud-Daled Kislev, which was a good sign. A Goyish judge, Charles P. Sifton, he was an Episcopalian. His father was a well-known theologian who was very close to the Jews, a real neighbor, if you're familiar with the literature. In fact, during the trial, he called the lawyers over to his table. It's called the sidebar. That I don't think it goes into the transcript of what's being said in the courtroom. It's like private between the judge and whoever he calls over. He told them that his father-in-law, he was divorced already, but his former father-in-law was a well-known theologian, was very friendly with the Jewish people, wrote a lot of nice books. For him, nice books. And he wanted to tell our lawyers, both sides, that in case anybody thinks because his father was a religious man and a theologian, maybe he should disqualify himself from the case. He should recuse himself. And of course they said no, but it started in Yud-Daled Kislev, and it ended 3 weeks later on a Friday, at the end of December. And it's strange that on the last day, I think it was on Friday or the Thursday before the last day, this Judge Sifton asked if he could see segments of the Rebbitson's deposition on the videotape. And they brought in a monitor, and I couldn't see. I was sitting at the tables in front of the judge. I couldn't see what he was looking at, but they put it on, and he was looking at it very, very deeply and thought for about 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then he put it off, and he said one word. This whole 3 weeks, he couldn't tell where he was going, whose side he was on. He was a very honest person, and the whole new federal building in Adams and in Cadman Plaza, downtown Brooklyn, the whole big 20-story federal building, We had a different building. They moved the courthouse that we used into that building. It's about 2 years old, magnificent. It's named after this judge, the Charles B. Sifton building. So he's looking at, we couldn't tell how, from his face and the body language, what he was thinking. But when he shut it off, he said out loud, one word, remarkable. The Rebbitson's, whatever he saw, what the Rebbitson said, I don't know what he saw. But like so many phases in the life of the Rebbitson. With the Rebbitson, I don't know how to say it. She pushed it, saved the Rebbe. She simply saved him. I remember back in 1950 Yud Shvat, after I knew the Friedman Rebbe, I was by Yechidus, by my mitzvah, and I was in Farbrengens. By the way, I'll digress for a minute, okay? In those years, the Friedman Rebbe, he wasn't well, and his dibur, his speech was impaired, and you had to really be used to hearing his expression so that you could make out what he was saying. The Rebbe could do that; others could do that when there was Farbrengen. There were few people that picked up and could chazer the sikha, and then it's printed. The sikha is from those years. It's printed. Because of the Rebbe's health, not more than 30, 40 people could get into the dining room on the second floor where the Rebbe lived, and in the dining room he farbrengen. So a young 16, 17, I was 13, 14-year-old boy, I had no chance in getting in. No, but nevertheless, I myself with some chavedim would wait outside the door before the farbrengen. Maybe we could get in during farbrengen. Would stand there for hours and pushing, pushing, no place to push. But it was you had a chol, maybe you could get in to see the Friedman Rebbe. So one time I was standing there were two staircases in 770 that go through the building. One is in the front, the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe's Yechidus room. Right, you see, right, there's a wooden staircase with a banister. That's one stairway, and then there's one in the middle of 770. It's a steel staircase, painted green. We used to call it the green steps and the wooden steps. And I don't remember. I think it was the green steps that went into the kitchen, the Rebbe's kitchen, and from there you could go into the dining room. So I was standing there. I gave up. I had no reason to think that I would get in. And suddenly the Rebbitson Chaimushka opens the door, and she sees me standing there, this little kid, and she says, "Geh rein." I went in. I went into the dining room, and I felt that I was in Gan Eden. It was so spiritual. It was so mystical. I never saw it before. It was the first time I was by Farbrengen. I was by Yechidus. But this was something very special, and indelibly engraved in my mind, in my heart. And I owed to the Rebbitson. She didn't have to say anything. She didn't have to do it. She could have closed the door. I wouldn't have had any qualms. But I'm eternally grateful for what she did for me to the young kid. I don't know if she knew who I was. So bring me back where I was. Oh yeah. So there were in 1950, after the Dalkus of the Friedman Rebbe, there were problems. There was some people held that Shag, his older brother-in-law, should be the Rebbe. I mean, we knew him, and we knew the Rebbe to the extent that kids can know. It wasn't a contest. And but you know, in terms of the Rebbe being a Rebbe, who recognized him as a Rebbe right away? The younger Talmidim, the students, the teenagers, and the older people. There weren't many. Crown Heights had maybe a dozen people living in Crown Heights, Chabadnikim. They mostly lived in Bronzeville. My in-laws lived in Bronzeville, and that was the Chabad neighborhood was in Bronzeville. So Shabbos by the Minyan in the 770, we didn't own the buildings on both sides and in back, but just 770 as you see it. Half of it was a backyard, not built up, so it was a very small elam. But we knew we knew enough and cared enough that there's some kind of discussions going on. But we youngsters had no part of it. And there came a time, it was a few months after the Histalkus of the Friedrich Rebbe. It was before the Basi Lagani from Tavshin Yud-Daled. And we maintained, I still maintain, the Rebbe became a Rebbe on Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. We didn't have to wait for the Maimon Basi Lagani. Even though the Rebbe at that time, in terms of his clothing, he wore a 2 or 3 piece suit, short jacket, even after Yud Shvat, till Chavdala Tevis, till almost a month before the next Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud-Daled, if you're following it. Wore a gray hat, he wore a watch, and he had ties with him, very, very distinguished, very, very proper. And he said later that he did that because if he put on a kapot in the weekdays and acknowledged sort of by that he wouldn't have the time to cope with the things he had to do, and people would bother him. But we were smart enough to bother him no matter what he was wearing. And my dad called me from Boston, and he asked me to ask the Rebbe for a bracha for a sheikhet. My father was a sheikhet. There was a sheikhet who wasn't well. He gave me the name of the disease that he had. I should ask the Rebbe for a bracha for this person. So I sent in a zettel to the Rebbe. That existed already even a few months in 1950. And 2 hours later, Rabbi Krinsky was looking for me. The Rebbe wants me to come into his office. So I went to the Rebbe's office, and he says, in Yiddish, from Taten, I'm going to Sheikhet. And he starts talking to me in Yiddish that Boston at that time was known for a lot of advanced medical research, a lot of universities, especially in Harvard. And he says it usually takes a half year to a year from the time research comes to a certain decision of something that can help a certain disease or someone's not well. It takes a half year to a year till it comes down to the doctors in their offices. So maybe we can find out, but the Rebbe must have had some knowledge of something happening in the research in Boston, that find out what's going on in this particular disease. And then he says to me, Alen Chassidus, the Sheikh. I said, I didn't know him, but it didn't seem so from what my father told me. So he tells me, Zol the Tata Len mit dem Chassidus. Zeh the refuah of the Mazen b'derech HaTeva, Zol the Tata Len mit dem Chassidus, at the Hab refuah. Now, if you can figure that out. What says b'derech HaTeva? Len and Chassidus. That's b'derech HaTeva. I mean, that was the Rebbe speaking. That was was not a joke. Somebody was sick. So my theory, not my theory, I'm sure I'm right that as far as I'm concerned, it happened instantaneous. Shemesh. So, and what happened? But the Rebbe was reluctant to accept it. Make it more official. And I'm told that it was the Rebbitson who, almost after a year, said to him, what I heard was that if you don't take care of it, everything my father built up of these 10 years in America and the years before that in Europe will fall apart. So it was she who convinced the Rebbe to accept the Messias. I don't know how much time we have, but that was one time that the Rebbitson saved all of us by pushing her husband in that direction. I want to mention another thing that I'm sure you're all familiar with. In Shmini Atzeres, in Topshin Lamed Ches, the Rebbe had that serious heart attack in the middle of HaKofis. You all know that probably. And I'll just be brief with it because there's one point I want to bring up from this whole episode. And nobody knew what it was. It was middle of HaKofis. You could see that Rebbe was in pain. I was standing right near him. His face turned ashen, unlike you've ever seen him to be that way before. And he finished HaKofis. He himself went with the last HaKofis, which was the minig, the first and second HaKofis that Rebbe went with his brother-in-law. They said, he went up to his room. Went up to his room, sat down, and there were a few doctors, not practicing physicians from Kranach, but they came one from Cleveland, one from Toronto. The doctors who came for Yontif, like a Chassidim come to the Rebbe for Yontif. And they didn't know what it was. They didn't have any equipment with them. They didn't even have a stethoscope with them. And they didn't know what to do. So the one doctor who worked in there was a Jewish hospital in Crown Heights in Prospect Place those years, and one of the doctors, Richter, who was the chief of surgery there, was here for Yom Tov. He went there. He got some equipment that you need and to attach to his chest so that he could see the heartbeat. I called 4 cardiologists. One from Manhattan, one from Long Island, one from Brooklyn. I think the second one from Manhattan. They all came, and they said they're cardiologists. They saw that it was a very, very serious heart attack, and they said this man has to go to the hospital right immediately. And the Rebbe said he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay. If I can be treated, I want to be treated right here. Yeah. So he didn't want to go. They could do nothing about it. And around 6 o'clock in the morning, the heartbeat started defibrillating, which is an uneven heartbeat, and it's very serious. It can be fatal. And the few doctors that were there, the Hamish doctor said, you know what, we have to sedate the Rebbe and put him in an ambulance and take him. They said Mount Sinai Hospital, huh? And what should they do? It's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's Sakonis Nefashis Mamish, and was Friedman. So they made this decision, and as they were doing that, the Rebbitson comes. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. She comes walking down from the second floor from her mother's house, and she looked very cool, calm, and collected. And she says, "What's going on?" So the doctors tell her that it's very serious, and they can't take the responsibility. The other doctors left. The other 4 specialists left. And we planned to sedate the Rebbe and take him to the hospital. Well, the Rebbitson was next of kin. They couldn't do anything without her. So she stared them all in the face, this petite, fragile, wonderful lady. And says without any excitement, in all years that I know my husband, I never saw him not to be in totally control of himself. And if you want to put him to sleep, I cannot allow it. Now, the strength of that lady, her husband's in the Sakonis Nefashis. It's not a game. We were all beside ourselves. She was the only one who had her head about her. And she made that decision, and it remained that way. I walked in from the Gan Eden Atachton to the Merkaz office on the other side, and I hear her step coming, following me. And she says to me, Rabbi Krinsky, ich kenne doch sehr viel Menschen. Ich kann nicht gefunden einen Doktor für meinen Mann. When she said that, I had this lightning bolt of Dr. Weiss in Chicago. I called him up, and he came, and he sent one of his friends from New Jersey before he got here. Police escort they brought him, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was stabilized. Everything was just fine. Dr. Weiss lost his practice because he stood for 2.5 weeks. He didn't leave the Rebbe's room. Had a big schuss, and the Rebbe got better. And so that was the Rebbitson again. And you know, tonight is the night before their wedding anniversary. In my eyes, it was really, the invitation said Yud-Daled, which is tomorrow, but it was at night. It was Thursday night. It was at night following. It was really Tesvav Kislev. After the chuppah, I don't know if you know this, they lost the ksubah, and the Friedman Rebbe sat down to write another ksubah. There was some, and people, it's not very well known that, and they never found the other one. So it was I'm going to have a personal note to say I was born 5 years to the day after the Rebbe's wedding. He was born, the wedding was in Tafresh Peites, that is 1939. I was born in 1933. The English calendar was different because it was between Rosh Hashanah and January 1st. 5 years to the day. So anyways, I remember, fast forward in Tovshin Yud-Daled, in 1954, Shabbos was Yud-Daled Kislev, and it was the 25th anniversary of the Rebbe and the Rebbitson, and the Rebbe came out to Fabring, and it was a very, very special Fabring, and the Rebbe was very sort of emotional. And that's when the Rebbe was Megala, when he revealed a lot of the minhagim that he did at his wedding I guess Al Pihiro from his father, or his father-in-law, and we do them today at Chuppah. And but he said something during that Farbrengen, again, which reflects on the Rebbitson. I mean, this is her house. She was the Keres Abayis right here. And he said that this is the day that connected me with you and you with me. What he meant to say was, it was the Rebbitson who he married. What brought him to the Rebbe, to become Rebbe. So she's in all our lives. She's very, very vividly and passionately, and it was very special. Now, that's another personal note, if you'll allow me to. It was back in the 80s. I remember the year. The Rebbe went to the Yehel on Yud-Daled Kislev, and we came back. Dav Mincha Maited was late at night, and I brought the Rebbe home on the driveway right here along the house. We walked in here, and the Rebbe got out of the car, and I was watching him start going up the steps, the back steps he just came up from. And he turns to me and he says, "It's your birthday today. It's your Yom Haledes. Did you have a cake?" It wasn't a joke. I said, "I don't know. I didn't get home yet. I really did. I know. I didn't discuss it with my wife, and I don't remember. I know when I was a kid, I used to have a birthday cake sometimes, but I said I didn't know. So I went home, and my wife baked the cake, and all the children came over. We said L'chaim et Habrach. The next morning, when I came to pick up the Rebbe, he said, "Did you have a cake last night?" So he was serious. And by us, in the family, in Hora, it's mitzvah de Reise. And on your birthday, you have a birthday cake, and you share it, and you share it with others. So the truth is that at every juncture, the Rebbitson played a very crucial role that people don't realize how not many people saw her. I'll tell you a cute little story that happened in this house. It was after the heart attack, that year, 1978 already. And the Rebbe was already walking, but I drove him home one afternoon, and I could see that from the street when I parked and I saw the Rebbe going up the steps. There was a box in front of his door, right there. There was a box, a big box, and it was blocking the door, and I was wondering what the Rebbe was going to do. So I started moving up the first set of stairs to see that to make sure it wasn't in its way, and then I saw that I was bending down to pick it up. It was a big box, a wide box, but it had handles on either side. There was a hole in each side of the box for two people to carry. It was a fruit delivery that was left by the door, and I wanted to grab it before the Rebbe, and he wouldn't let me. So he settled to give me one side, and he took the other side. And he opened the door. It was locked, of course. And he opened the door, and he both walked into the house. The Rebbe on this side, and I on the right side. And the Rebbitson was in the kitchen. She heard us coming. She didn't know what was happening, and she called out her husband's name. And the Rebbe didn't respond. And then she came out from the kitchen and saw us standing there, holding the box in that room. She couldn't stop laughing. I was frightened of it. I didn't know what to do, but we eventually put the box down and I left. There are many, many cute little anecdotes like that, but I'm going to wish you all a happy 11th anniversary. And birthday.
Did you have a cake?
Yeah, it's time till Thursday night, Friday. Happy Yud-Daled Kislev, Friedman, Chanukah, Matzlacha, all the brachas. This is the place to wish. This is a very holy house. We talk about Dida B'Tachteinen. This is the Rebbe's Dida, the Rebbe's and Shiyah. This is what it is. This is what it is.
Thank you.
want to introduce you to Rabbi Friedman.
Since we started with stories, let me tell you a story. There was a shliach who was traveling, and he came to a city where there was a very wealthy man, and he said to the shliach, if you're going back to New York, my daughter left and joined a cult. This was back in the 70s, I think, or the 60s. And we don't know where she is. We've lost touch with her. If you could please find her and talk some sense into her. So he went, and somehow he found her and invited her to come for Shabbos to the Chabad house. She came once, twice, and she started warming up. A while later, she told this shliach that she had met a man who was also becoming observant, and they want to get married. But they want him to be Masada Kedushin. So in order to do it, he had to do a little research on the family, where the background is. And he found out that the Kala's family was always from way back in the old country. The Chassan comes from a family who moved to Israel. And in Israel, they became completely anti-religious. But because the Chassan Kala agreed to mikveh and kashrus and Shabbos, he agreed to do the chuppah. The chuppah was someplace in Manhattan. And the day before the wedding, the Rebbe was at the oil. Now they picked for their wedding date, they picked a date on the English calendar sometime in December. And that year, as we'll soon see, the Rebbe was at the oil the day before the wedding, and the shliach had written into the Rebbe a zettel that he's going to be doing the chuppah. The Rebbe read that note at the oil, and he wrote. The Rebbe didn't speak at the oil, so if he wanted to convey a message, he would write a little note and give it to Rabbi Krinsky, who was always there. The Rebbe wrote a little note that basically said like this: look at the Hashgacha Pratis. They picked for their chasana the same day that I got married, exactly 50 years ago. And in fact, the chassan's grandfather was a Rav in Varsha. He came to the chasana, and he gave me a wedding present, his sefer. It's in my office, on the right side when you're coming from the door, near the Medrash Tanchuma, and it would be a good idea to have that sefer with you under the chuppah. They went into the Rebbe's room, they found the sefer, and the shliach took it with him to the chuppah. I wanted to check to see if the story was accurate. So I asked Rabbi Krinsky, you remember such a note? He says, yeah, and he tells me the whole thing. I said, boy, you've got an incredible memory. You have hundreds of notes. And he says, no, that one I worked very hard on, because when the Rebbe wrote the note, it was laying on top of a stack of papers, so the writing was very hard, and it wasn't clear. I worked very hard at deciphering what it said there, but that's what it said. So they found the sefer on the leaf, on the fly, what's it called, the front page, the fly leaf. It said, Warsaw, in Hebrew. It said Warsaw, Yud-Daled Kislev, Tafresh Pei Tes, and the guy's name, the author's name. Under the chuppah, the Kala asked the Shliach to say something. In some places, they have a custom that the rabbi says whatever. He wasn't prepared. He didn't know what. So he said, I have here in the bag the sefer written by the Chossen's grandfather, who was a Rav in Varsha. And the Rebbe standing by the oil with all sorts of serious issues to take care of, remembered that your grandfather was at his wedding, that it was exactly 50 years since his wedding, and he is worried or concerned that the Zayde should have nachas, seeing his grandson getting married like a Jew. So the Rebbe asks me to bring the sefer, representing the neshama of the grandfather, that it should be under the chuppah. As he said this, the boy's father, the chassan's father, ran out of the room. He follows him, and he finds him in a phone booth in the lobby of this fancy hotel, crying like a baby. Now this father came for the ufruf to Crown Heights, but he refused to participate in a minyan. He didn't want to be called up to the Torah. He thought the whole thing was terrible. They finally convinced him that he should come to a shul where the davening was already over and only the immediate family would be there, and he won't have to make a bracha, and he won't have to be called up to the Torah, he won't have to. So he agreed to be there. Now he runs out and he's crying like a baby. He calms down and he says to the shliach, I used to know. I went to Cheder when I was a kid, back in Europe, but I have forgotten everything. You have to show me exactly what to say. Help me. And he made a bracha and a chuppah, and he became a Baal Tshuva. So on the Rebbe's anniversary, standing at the oil, not on the anniversary, concerning the anniversary, standing at the oil, the Rebbe, just in passing, one of the many notes that happened that day changed this person's life and the family's life. And so it is a special day. The Rebbe said, when the Rebbitson passed away, that people can come visit the Shiva right away on the first day of the Shiva. Usually you don't go until the third day. But the Rebbe said, no, with her it's different, because the Rebbitson's name was Chaya, which means life, and life goes on. You can start the Shiva immediately. Her name is Chaya. If we understand what exactly is life. There's a pasuk in Koheles that makes it very, very clear. The pasuk says, "Ure'ei chayim im ha'isha asher ahavta," which could be seen as advice. Make a life with the woman you love. Or it could be an instruction. Get a life. Get a life by marrying the woman, your wife that you love. But it also is telling us something about life itself. That marriage and life are closely related. And the simple, brief concept is, in order for a person to exist, you don't need anybody else. Having another person does not increase your existence, unless it's a slave who serves you, makes your existence better. But for existing, you don't need another person. In fact, existence almost rejects and resists another person. And that's why the very fact that the world exists is klipa. It's unholy. Because the truth is, there's only the Eibishter, ein od milvado, there's no one besides him, which means only he exists. And if something else exists, it's unholy. Because when you have two things that exist, one denies the other. I'm not you, you're not me. And it almost seems like this is a law of nature that two people who both exist can never share that existence. Because existence is exclusive. If this is my place, then it can't be your place. If I'm real, then I don't need you. Because if I needed you, what do you mean? I'm not real? I'm not good enough? So existence is unholy because existence is separation. My existence is not your existence. And separation is always unholy. But life, which is different from existence, is the exact opposite. Alone, a person does not have a life. So what is the difference? The difference is that achdus, oneness, happens when you share a life. Separation happens when you exist side by side. And it's a very useful little analogy. When you have two drops of water, side by side, close to each other, you have two separate drops. Two drops of water. What keeps the drops in their shape? Why doesn't it just flow away? There's this thing called surface tension. The surface tension keeps the shape of each of the drops. But if you break that surface tension, if you just touch the drop, it runs. It loses its shape. And then the two drops become one drop. There aren't two drops anymore. So the surface tension, that's the existence. And in existence, you have to be complete. You can't depend on anybody else for your existence. So when a chassan and kala get together, they each have to be complete in their own existence. But why are they getting married? Because together they can make a life. Because life happens only when you share it. So it's not a surprise, or it shouldn't be a surprise. When a couple get married, you're celebrating an anniversary, a husband and wife have developed and created a life. And a life means only together, never separate. It's not surprising that when you create a life together, you become capable of producing another life. And perhaps this is what the Rebbe meant when they asked him why he's giving out dollars. You remember what the Rebbe said? He heard from the Friedman Rebbe that whenever two Jews get together, it should benefit a third Jew. So we are meeting, I'm giving you $1 to give to a third person, because whenever two Jews get together, it should benefit a third Jew. But the Rebbe also said, I'm making you a shliach to give tzedakah. So are you worried about a third Jew, or are you just being a shliach for tzedakah? Or is it the same thing? What does this mean? When two Jews get together, it should benefit a third Jew. Doesn't that sound like marriage? When two Jews get together, a third Jew is born. It really benefits. It's a big benefit. But they have to get together. When two Jews get together, not when there are two Jews. When there are two Jews, a third Jew is not going to benefit. The only time you can give life is if you're having life, if you're alive. And you're alive when you're together and become one. When you're separate, you can't benefit a third Jew. But to make it even stronger, how together are the first two Jews that can benefit and give life to a third? How together? You can agree on something. You meet with each other, you talk, and you say, well, what can we do for a third Jew? And you do it. But it doesn't compare to the togetherness of being a shliach. So when the Rebbe says, I'm making you a shliach, that describes the togetherness. Now there are two Jews who are together. Because I'm the Mishaleach and you're the shliach, and shluchei shel adam k'moisei. So now that we are together, because I'm giving you a shlichus and you're accepting the shlichus, now we can benefit a third Jew. Now we understand why, if all Jews are together, it benefits the Eibishter. Because togetherness is life, and life is contagious. Existence is not. Your existence does not help anybody else exist. In fact, it gets in the way. But life is contagious. So when we have life, we give life. And I just saw a clip about a man from Johannesburg who went to see the Rebbe many years ago. And the Rebbe said to him, when you inspire a Jew, it's a nuclear explosion. Which means it'll reach wider and wider. There's no end. It'll keep expanding. And then he said, and I understood it because of who was saying it. Because take a look at what happened. The Rebbe touched a number of souls, and look at the explosion. Every soul touched another soul, and that soul touched it. So it is, not was, but it is a nuclear explosion. So coming to the Rebbe's house, here where the Rebbe lived, he lived because here's where the Rebbitson lived with him. So here is where life happens. And from here, that nuclear explosion extended, of course, to 770, and then from 770, all over the world. There's a famous salesman who wrote many books on why he became so successful. He said, every person I speak to, I make believe that there are 200 people. Every person represents 200 people. Why 200? Interesting. He once went to a funeral, in a funeral home. And the room was filling up, and the director of the funeral home said, do you know that the average person's funeral, 200 people come? The average person affects 200 people in his life, in his lifetime. And at his funeral, generally, as a rule, around 200 people come to a funeral. So he said, if that's true of death, it must also be true of life. So from then on, every time he looked at a person, he said, oh, 200 customers. And of course, he spoke to him like 200 customers, which is very different from one shmendrik where, he's either going to buy or not buy, who cares? By the Rebbe, it's far more than 200. Every shliach has affected more than 200 people. Every member in Crown Heights who has gone out on Miftsayim for more than 3 years has changed more than 200 lives. It's a nuclear explosion. And it can only happen because life explodes. Existence just drags on. So, being here is certainly the place to ask for life, for inspiration, for connectedness, the ability to become one, the ability to become connected with each other, with Achdus Yisrael, Achdus Hashem. Oneness is life. Every separation gets in the way. So, l'chaim. This is an anniversary of our lives. We come alive on this day. Because, like Rabbi Krinsky quoted, this is the day that connected me to you and you to me. So what is the Rebbe saying? Now that we are connected, a third Jew has to benefit. L'chaim.